Proudly Asian, a podcast series that tells bold and proud stories of Asians by Asians. I'm Isabel Wong, a financial journalist who wants to uncover the many Asian stories around us that are waiting to be told. There's never just one way to look at Asians. This podcast will take you through a deep dive into the life stories, struggles, and triumphs of young Asians around the world. On today's episode, we are joined by Kat Lieu, a Vietnamese-Chinese American originally from Brooklyn, New York. As the founder of social media community Subtle Asian Baking, Kat has built a global platform that has over 200,000 followers. She talks to us about baking the Asian way, violence against Asians in America, and her upcoming cookbook. Welcome to Proudly Asian, Kat. It's such a great pleasure to have you. You know, after talking to you on Instagram DM for a couple of weeks by now, I'm so excited to be able to have this conversation with you.
Thank you so much, Isabel. I'm so glad to be here.
Great. And for our listeners who are curious, Kat is actually the queen of arguably one of the most satisfying Instagram pages out there. Is a global sensation called Subtle Asian Baking. And basically for myself, ever since I found this page, I just found myself not being able to stop scrolling because one can only watch so many cat videos, but just look at those baking videos. They are to die for. So thank you so much for doing this and celebrate Asian baking, Kat.
Oh, thank you.
I would call it the adult version of slime appreciation because I'm not sure if you know about slime, but a long time ago, I was obsessed with watching slime videos on Instagram. Like I would follow this page where they would be kneading and these colorful buttery slime, and they would also call the slime that they sell some delicious names such as taro milk tea, and they are based in California. So whenever I was in California, I would wait for their page to restock so I could order some, but for some reason I would always miss the timing to order the new slime. But now Subtle Asian Baking is my new obsession, and who knew watching someone knead a milk bread dough would be so satisfying. But to kickstart with a conversation, Kat, I would like to ask you a question that I ask every single guest on this show, which is, who are you, what are you, and where did you grow up?
All right, Isabel, I ask myself that question all the time. I feel that as the years pass, a little bit of me changes and a little bit of me disappears. So I ask myself that all the time. Who am I really? You know, I used to be a physical therapist, and now I'm a baker at home who writes and who is authoring a cookbook and doing my own website and things like that. But the short story is, you know, I was born in Montreal, Canada. Who am I? I'm half Vietnamese and I'm half Chinese and an American because my parents came here from Montreal when I was 2 years old, so like in the late 80s. And so I'm a little bit of everything. I like to call myself that. Like in my 20s, I would say I'm a jack of all trades, right? I love to bake. I love to do art. I love to write. I love science. I love chess. I love video games. So I feel like I'm a little bit of everything. And I think that's what makes Subtle Asian Baking so fun too, because I put a lot of like my personality and my spin, and along with like a lot of other bakers who I feature as well. So that's the short story of who I am.
Mm-hmm. Wow, you're so multi-talented. So your interest in baking actually went way back since you were young.
Yeah, so the story is that I started baking when I was 4 years old. If you consider cracking a few eggs as baking. So I'm joking here. It was my grandma who baked. She made me a fresh cream cake for my 5th birthday, and I remember it to this day. The cream was so fluffy and white. There were strawberries and fruits, and it's like the cakes that you would find in Tous les Jours or Paris Baguette, all these really nice Korean style bakeries in New York City and so forth. But did I really bake early on? No, because my ovens were always filled with pots and pans, and I never had enough space to bake. I never had my own kitchen until 2017. So it wasn't until in my 30s that I actually started baking.
Well, I mean, you were much better than me. Like, I don't think I could crack eggs when I was 4, so you were way ahead. But I mean, just to follow up on the fact that you are half Vietnamese and half Chinese, what was it like growing up in a Vietnamese-Chinese household? What was breakfast like, and how were your parents? Any expectations from them?
Yeah, sure. Breakfast, I was actually thinking about this because I haven't eaten breakfast for years now. I don't eat until 11 or 12 every day. I do intermittent fasting. So I had to think about what I used to eat as a kid. And our foods growing up was actually very American. So we had the Pop Tarts, the cereals, the yogurts, the Eggo waffles. That's something my dad had every day going to work. An Eggo waffle smothered with peanut butter. Every now and then my mom would buy like a Chinese bakery goodie that we would have, like an egg tart for breakfast. But most of the time it was just, like I said, the waffle, a bagel, and cereal and Pop Tarts. And then on special occasions, we'd have dim sum, which is very special because dim sum is not cheap. And growing up, we were not like wealthy, right? And then the other special thing that we would have on the weekends was if my dad would take us to a diner and we'll have sunny side up eggs with toast and hot cocoa with like mountains of whipped cream. Our household was actually very American, I would have to say. My mom is Chinese, so you know how households are, the mother usually is the bigger influence of what you eat, and you know how you dress and the things you celebrate. My dad was more quiet. He was very stoic. He didn't bring a lot of his Vietnamese culture to our household. Also, he spoke fluent Cantonese, so our household, we all spoke Chinese Cantonese. And growing up in that household, I would say it's a very typical story. It's everything that Simu Liu would talk about, you know, how his parents are more proud of his math trophies. You know, my parents were always expecting me to be in healthcare. And that's what led me to my healthcare career. You know, I was always interested in other things like web design and video games and writing and artwork. But those were things that my parents didn't feel like would be very good for my career. But it was very funny too, because once I reached 18, they also thought that I should become a housewife because they wanted me to get married so fast, right? Very typical too there. But yeah, so healthcare was their expectation growing up in the household.
Well, you probably make them proud by having a career in healthcare. And now, I mean, do they understand what you're currently doing? Are they proud of you?
My dad never got to understand this because unfortunately he passed away in 2020.
Right.
He never knew that I was going through this whole baking phase. I don't think he processed that because he had Lewy body's dementia. So at times he wouldn't know who he was or who we were. But I'm very sure that he would have been proud because he was like such a proponent of me, even though like he also pushed me towards healthcare. I remember he was the one that, you know, always believed in like my dreams, and whenever I talked to him, he would always say like, yeah, that's very smart. That's very smart of you. Things like that. I think my mom now is slowly accepting that I'm moving away from healthcare. Once she saw me like, you know, on King 5 News, on the Mei Li show, talking to you and things like that. I think she's slowly accepting that. But she also recently asked me when I'm getting a Netflix show. And I said, Mom, can you just relax a little bit and let me breathe? You know, let the things just flow naturally, right? Yeah, so I think she is proud too. She doesn't say it, but I think she really is.
Great. Well, hopefully I could see Subtle Asian Baking coming to Netflix very soon.
Hopefully.
Yes. And I mean, for yourself, growing up as an Asian American, what was the experience like?
Yeah, this is also a question that I think about a lot. Growing up as an Asian American, it's a duality, I think. It's a dichotomy. And also at the same time, you're also questioning who you are. That's why I started it with saying like, who am I, right? Am I American enough? Am I Asian enough? If I go to Hong Kong or I go to Vietnam, am I an other, you know, or am I part of them? I've never been to Vietnam. I've never been to anywhere outside of Hong Kong and China, right? And in America, I always celebrated everything that Americans celebrated, you know, Thanksgiving, Halloween, Christmas, New Year's. Then I also celebrated Lunar New Year. So I always had these two types of cultures and traditions. I felt I love eating hot dogs. I love hamburgers. I love all the traditions that Americans celebrate. But at the same time, people would ask me things like, do you celebrate Thanksgiving? And that makes my jaw drop, as an adult when someone asks me that. And you always feel like you're just not 100% belonging in America because of the way you look, because of, perhaps the way I talk, my skin, things like that. So it's not always bad and it's not always good, but I feel like it's gotten better because now that we're more open to being vocal and people are learning more and people are realizing things about, there's Asian hate out there and people are willing to be educated. They're appreciating our culture more. So it's not all bad. And I see it's actually getting better, but we just have to get through the worst parts first. So yeah, I'm always questioning that, who am I? What is it like to be Asian American? It's not 100% bad. It's also tough, tough to answer that question because you're always reflecting, you're always thinking,
Yeah, exactly. I can totally relate. And it just sometimes happens every day that you have to explain who you are to people. There will always be someone who is confused, and there will always be someone who just really can't compute whatever you're telling them about your life story.
Absolutely.
But do you think this Asian experience in America was the same for your husband who is Filipino, and do you think it will be the same for your son?
I think it's going to be very different for my son. It already is right now. When I grew up, I was the only Chinese girl, only Asian girl in my class from first all the way to fifth grade in elementary school. There were Asian boys, but there were no Asian girls. And everyone picked on me. So everyone bullied me. But now in schools, people talk about bullying. People talk about how to deal with bullies and how you could report all of that and, talk about mental health. I don't remember hearing about mental health until I was much older, maybe 18 or up till my early 20s. So I feel that my son will have a much better experience than I've had. I don't think he'll experience so much racism and microaggressions. Also, as a man, when he grows up as a man, he'll be a little bit more removed from that. I feel like being Asian female, I don't think that's something even my husband would understand, but he definitely also faced the racism that I've faced. People used to call him tofu head. He was beaten up. I was beaten up. So I think his experiences are less in the sense of sexism and the microaggressions. So he's more well respected at work. When he talks, people will listen. When I talk, people don't like to listen. They like to talk over me. Things like that. So in a sense, my husband as a Filipino American had similar experiences as I have. He also had maybe different, especially now in the workplace. I know he's never felt what I felt, like the injustices that I felt, being bitten in the arm by a male coworker. He's never been bitten in the arm by a male coworker. He's never been told things like, don't shit where you eat when a coworker is pursuing me. No coworkers were pursuing him. Things like that. I think men and women are put under different standards. So, and then we have the Asian aspect, and he also has a more Americanized name than I do. So if people are emailing him, they actually do respect him a little bit more than when they email me and so forth.
Wow. Yeah, I must agree with you. The experience of being an Asian man and Asian woman, there's a lot to talk about because even for Asian women, right, we would be told we could either be quiet or loud. It could never be both. Either soft or fierce, it could never be both. And since very young, we would be programmed to think that if someone is pursuing us, but if we're not interested, we should just brush it off politely, nicely, because if we put our foot down, it might put us in danger.
Yes.
Yeah, the person might actually badmouth us for saying some really negative comments that I probably don't want to say in this episode. Yeah, but it's definitely a very different experience and it's still a struggle. Next up, it brings me to ask that during the pandemic, even now, it hasn't been a good start of the year for the Asian community, especially in America, because we witnessed the murders of two Asian women, Michelle Go and Christina Yuna Lee. It's quite frankly, it's just been tiring seeing all these violence and hate crimes against Asians. But being an Asian woman in America currently, how does it all make you feel?
Yeah, so to your point earlier, I just want to add also, like, very recently, I was at my dental appointment where my dentist said, "You have beautiful teeth. You should smile more."
Oh.
And I thought, when I smiled at people in New York City, I was stalked. And I would be catcalled.
Oh, dear.
I would be followed. There are things that you don't want to have that resting bee face that people say, but you can't help it sometimes. Because when you're a certain way, like I'm more outspoken and I'm confident and I'm loud and I love to smile and laugh, people think that you're, that S word. Or you're like you're open to like their advances and things like that. And
you're like asking for attention.
Yes. You don't even have to dress a certain way. You just have to talk a certain way or act a certain way. There were so many misperceptions of me as I was navigating my single life in New York City. And it's just been tough. And I grieve so hard for Michelle Go and Christina Yuna Lee. And I think that's what kickstarted, the activism that we're doing this month currently. And we could talk about that later. But it's just so heartbreaking, Isabel. These are women who are just like me and you, around the same age, 30s, right? 35. They did nothing but exist. They did nothing but just look like who they look like, Asian females. Right. So we're always overly sexualized. We're that doe type, we're that quiet woman. We're the kind that people can target so easily, right? And it's just so sad and so depressing and it just made me so angry because I know like this hate against Asian, the brutality, the violence, the shootings last year in the spa, that is all hate against Asian women, right? And then you have the hate against our older adults, people who look like our grandparents, our uncles, our fathers. How heartbreaking is that? It's made me so angry. And people ask me, why do you do so many fundraising things? You're just a Facebook group. It's because we have to. Because who else is going to do it for us? We have to stop this. We have to do the changes that we want to see, right? So all the hate crimes, the violence against Asians, it first angers me and now it's motivating me to activate and to do something about it and to be vocal and not to be silent anymore. And, to get my community of bakers to donate, to fundraise, to speak up. Right. It's just sad.
It really gets me emotional as well. So
Yeah.
I mean, it's hard because whatever we do as Asian women, it's never right. It will still put us in danger. Or sometimes when we decide, okay, this time I'm going to put my foot down. I'm going to be hard on other people. I won't let them walk all over me. And then that's when people will be like, you should chill, tone it down.
Yeah.
Like, why so aggressive?
Yes.
It all comes from years of microaggression that was addressed at us.
You're right.
But I would like to really thank you for doing all the work that you've been doing, because I know Subtle Asian Baking has been hosting multiple global virtual bake-offs and given away thousands of dollars in prizes and to charity to empower AAPI communities and bring awareness to stop Asian hate movement. I know there's a lot of work to be done, but I'm really, really thankful that you've been using your influence and your page to just highlight all these important issues. Next up, I would like to talk more about your page, Subtle Asian Baking. So, as you mentioned earlier, you went from working in healthcare to starting a global movement for Asian baking. How did the idea of Subtle Asian Baking come about?
It is a community that was born in the pandemic, I have to say. It is a community that, I'm a glutton. I love to eat, right? So we came back from a trip to Japan. This was February 2020. And then March 2020 was when the first case of, I don't quote me on this, but I'm remembering it, right? So COVID cases started in Washington State, where I'm in right now, right? So we just came back from Japan, where there was a lot of COVID already in Asia. And then we came back to Washington, where COVID was here again, and there was surges. And then we were told to stay at home, work from home. We were quarantined, remember the isolation in the quarantine phase, right? And then at that point, I was always thinking about the chew crumb that I had in Tokyo, right? The delicious mochi and the milk breads and the fruit parfaits and everything that was so accessible from just walking out of our hotel to getting the dessert that's right there. I mean, even the food in the Japan McDonald's is amazing, right? And it's not something that I can easily get without driving some distance, and I'm not a very fond of driving. I've crashed too much and I get very anxious these days when I drive. And so, moving from New York City, where I lived in a place called 86th Street, Bay Parkway, South Brooklyn, I could walk out of my condo and just a few blocks away, there were Asian bakeries. There's probably 5 on one street. So I could get an egg tart, I could get milk bread, I could get whatever I want to eat very easily. Come 2017, come to here, there's not a lot of Asian baked goodies that I can access. Like I said, I have to drive everywhere and I don't like to drive. So I thought, maybe it's time now that I'm missing the mochi so much, the milk bread so much. It's time to start baking more. And we have to bake the Asian way, because I was baking a lot of banana bread, and I was getting sick of banana bread, right? We bought a lot of bananas early COVID. I was like, I don't want to eat another banana bread. I want some milk bread. I want something with matcha. I want something with mochi. So I went online and I looked for recipes. And then I had a question. I was like, if I wanted to make an egg tart, should I put lard in it or should I put butter? And which type should I make? Should I make the pot? And I wanted to talk to other bakers who also are baking the Asian way. And there was no community back then for bakers to bounce inspiration off of each other, to ask questions, to crowdsource the recipes. I thought, let's start this. There was Subtle Asian Traits, very, very popular. 2 million members throughout the world are on Subtle Asian Traits. 1 in 3 Asians who are on Facebook is on a Subtle Asian community. And I thought, why not start my own Subtle Asian community, right? I called it Subtle Asian Baking. There was no Subtle Asian Baking back then. It's all about just baking. And also because I didn't want to see a lot of meat. I want to see more desserts. I feel like we have to move towards more sustainability with eating. So I don't want to see like raw meat and meat dishes all the time, like on other cooking pages. So I thought, let's do more of a sweet page. So desserts, dan tat, egg tarts, milk breads, mochis, cakes, and then people just flowed in, It was May 24, 2020. I invited 100 of my close friends, and then word of mouth. And then I got a few moderators on board. They're all volunteers. I love them to death. They've been with us since 2020. And then 100 members became a few thousand members. And then by December, it was 70,000 members. But now it's 150,000 members. It just grew exponentially, organically on its own. So everyone just wants to bake the Asian way, it seems.
Wow. What's a journey? But I mean, it's understandable as well, because what's not to love about Asian baking? It's just so colorful, so flavorful. I might be biased, but I do think Asian baking is better than Western baking. Biased, but not untrue. But I would like to ask the expert here now, like, what are some of the key differences between Asian baking and Western baking?
A lot of people would scoff at the idea that there's a whole category of baking called Asian baking. When you Google Asian baking right now, a lot of the things that you'll find is from me. So my website, modernasianbaking.com, Subtle Asian Baking, the baking group, all of the recipes that I've put out so far. People would say, baking should be French baking, Italian baking, American baking, British baking, right? What is Asian baking? And what differentiates it, I'll have to say, is the use of a different ingredient, like ube, pandan, matcha, black sesame, soy sauce, miso, things that you find across Asia, yuzu, butterfly pea flour, things like that, right? Aside from the flavors and the ingredients, a technique, steaming, frying, not just baking it in an oven. You could steam your cakes, like the malaigos that you have on Lunar New Year, things like that. Even using the microwave to make mochi. Very different techniques, right? Using chopsticks to mix your dough.
Yeah.
not just using a blender or a stand mixer. And then there's the texture. So there's QQ texture, which is, think boba, right? The chewiness of boba, that's QQ. And then you have the airy chiffon cakes, right? And then you have your pastries, your laminated doughs that you find in your egg tarts, things like that. So texture, technique, flavor, and then of course the background of it, the history behind the baked goodie, that's all part of Asian baking.
And to follow up on that, to broaden the conversation, what can we learn really about like Asian cultures and heritage through the different baked recipes and techniques that you have just mentioned there?
Absolutely, Isabel. I just had a conversation with another podcaster today, and she mentioned how her nephew has never had an egg tart and has never had dim sum. And she fears that, this child is also not speaking the mother tongue anymore, right? Cantonese, only speaking English. And I feel the same way for my son. So I forced him to learn Mandarin, not Cantonese, which is my mother tongue. I feel like a lot of it, your identity can be erased when you're assimilating, other cultures, and you're forgetting things that are from your background. Like imagine your parents never gave you a mooncake on Mid-Autumn Festival. And then when you grow older, you won't know that you eat mooncake on Mid-Autumn Festival. You don't celebrate it anymore. And then you lose a part of that whole heritage and culture, right? Through food, through baking, the Asian way, through cooking the Asian way, you are connected to your ancestors. You are connected to your history, your heritage, the flavors, the ingredients of the countries that your ancestors are from, right? Like, for instance, my grandma used to make mooncakes from scratch, right? And that just brought me so much joy and so much pride, right? And I'm not just eating a mooncake that I bought. I'm eating a mooncake that my grandma made with her own hands. And she tells the story of, the moon goddess in the moon with her jade bunny and things like that. So that process, that baking together, her telling me the story, it all connects you back to your past, your heritage, that otherwise you may lose. Like imagine you never get to eat an authentic, dish from Hong Kong or Canton or from Hanoi, Vietnam, things like that. You lose a part of that, a piece of your identity, a piece of your heritage and your history. But bringing back the food, being able to cook together, to bake together, to pass down recipes that are authentic, right? That really connects you back to your heritage and your culture. And I think that's the short answer.
For sure. Yeah. I mean, it's a very important topic and we could talk hours and hours about it. But the other main reason to really connect our future generations with these Asian food and to get them to get to know the cultures and heritages that sometimes if they don't know that part, it might indirectly cause them trauma growing up as well, because they would always be like, okay, my mom told me I might be Korean, but I have no idea what Korean food is. And then I get questioned when I go to South Korea. So this could happen. So, I mean, it's very important to get your kids to be connected with the heritage, maybe first through food.
Yes.
But I know that there has been a project that you are working on a lot of projects and a lot of initiatives. You're a busy person. But one of the exciting projects that you've been working on is a book called Modern Asian Baking at Home. You announced it and it's now available for pre-order online. How's the book going for you?
I think it's been wonderful. It's going very well, Isabel, I have to say. There's a lot of interest. There's a lot of interesting things too that happen. So I'll tell you that story in a little bit. I think it's going better than I had expected because, technically I'm a first-time author, even though I've self-published a few books in the past. I've self-published some rom-coms. This is my very first cookbook. It's been a very interesting journey from how it started to all the way to this point. And how it started was we had an Eater article. Eater.com featured subtle Asian baking in December 2020. And then around January 2021, an editor emailed me, like sent me an email that looked like spam. It's like, are you working on a book? And I'm like, I'm not working on a book. What is this email? So I was going to ignore it because he didn't address me by name. He just wrote like, hey, are you working on a book? And then has his name, his title. And then I of course, I stalked him a little bit on Google and like have to see if he's legit. And then he actually is legit. And I found out, oh, he's the editor, the acquisition editor of a book called New World Sourdough, which is from by Brian Ford, and it's actually doing very well on the book in the bookstore. So I was like, okay, so maybe I should talk to this guy. And I did. And then he asked for a book proposal and a pitch and an idea. Asked for basically a lot of work that I had to put out, right? Mm-hmm. So I did a 14-page proposal in a PowerPoint style, gave it to him, then went through all these meetings with his team, and then finally got a book contract and a book deal, and then had to write the book. I had to write the book within, I think, 6 months. And then now it's ready to be printed. It's ready for pre-order. The pre-orders have been doing pretty well. It's not like a New York Times bestseller or anything, but like for a first-time Asian female author, it's doing pretty well, with zero marketing budget. So right now, I'm waiting on the publisher to do their marketing piece. But, aside from putting it out there in all the online bookstores and making the cover and putting the book together, I haven't really gotten a lot of like media attention. Like all of the podcasts are things that I've asked to join, like I reached out to you, right, and things like that, and reaching out to like people like Michelle Lee, who connected me to King 5 in Seattle. So a lot of it has been on my own, and it's been tiring because you don't know that after you produce a book, after you write it, you hand it off, you have to become a full-time marketer. Yeah. So you market the book like crazy. So I've been marketing it on Instagram and on TikTok. And for many months, my TikTok has been frozen, shadow banned, no activity. No one was looking at, the videos. I had like maybe 2 views on like great quality videos. Then all of a sudden, one video just blew up and got 5 million views on TikTok, became viral. And then I just posted a little line because TikTok doesn't allow you to write a lot on the comments. So I wrote, hey, support me. I'm a POC female author. I have a cookbook out. I was just trying to be very succinct and to the point for the word count. But I got so much backlash from that one comment, like hundreds of comments after that saying, why should we support you? You shouldn't tell people that you're an Asian author. You should be quiet. Your food should just do the talking. And I thought, I didn't even say anything verbally. I just wrote that because of the word count. I just wanted people to know, this is an authentic Asian baking cookbook by an Asian female author. But then, there's just so much hate for a whole month from like January of this year all the way to even now. There's just like so many comments on how my bread looks moldy, how, I should not use this as a tactic to market my book, should basically erase my identity and things like that. So that's been very interesting, Isabel. That part has been a little bit tough because I consider that to be cyberbullying. Yeah. And this type of online hate, and people would tell me that I've been very negative, like you mentioned earlier. So once I'm vocal about this, once I'm visible, people would say I'm the troublemaker. I'm the one focusing on the cyberbullying and the hate, and I should only focus on positivity. But you have to remember all of this online hate can transfer into the real world as real hate. Yeah. That becomes brutality and violence and hostility and murder, right? So that's why I was not, silent about this. So it's been a very interesting journey, Isabel.
Kat, I'm so sorry you're going through this. And I mean, the world needs to realize how amazing of a woman that you are, the important work that you've been doing. And what you just mentioned there is again, like the term or the phrase of like being Asian is seen as offensive no matter where we go or what we do. Sometimes it's like if we don't do Asian thing, they'll be like, oh, are you even Asian? Why can't you be more Asian? But then if we do something Asian, then they'll be like, oh, just Asians doing Asian things. So can't win.
No, you really can't.
Yeah, but well, I mean, I hope you will overcome that very quickly. And I do see a lot of support of a lot of podcasters, a lot of online communities, but you have our support. So hang in there, Kat.
Thank you. It's gotten much better once I was vocal. You know, if I was silent about it, then the trolls just would not stop. So I actually became a troll myself and clapped back.
Yeah.
And that has actually been helpful because now the community knows. And then when someone posts something nasty on one of like my Instagram or my TikTok, then I have a flood of people who will come and defend me. So now I'm just ignoring the comments, right? Unless someone is like being threatening or hostile, I'll just ignore the comments now.
Yeah. Wow. I mean, no textbooks or no one actually prepares us for all these hate. So it's just, wow. But a change of topic, I would like to get a recipe from you for any of our listeners who are non-bakers or might not have a full-on kitchen like myself. What would be a recipe that you would recommend that's easy and delicious, but it's also maybe like a classic Asian baked recipe?
Absolutely. Okay. Do you have a microwave?
I do, thankfully.
And a stovetop, do you have that?
Yep.
Do you have a waffle maker?
Unfortunately, no.
Okay. Can you steam things at home?
I think so. I think I could get that set up.
Okay, so this is almost foolproof. It's not absolutely foolproof, but I think mochi would be your go-to recipe. Because you can mix mochiko or glutinous rice flour with any type of liquid or even tofu or ice cream, any type of your favorite ice cream. Mix it with the glutinous rice flour. Add a little bit of sugar, and then once it's a cohesive mix, you pop it into the microwave. Right. You just cook it for a minute, and then take it out, stir it, pop it back into the microwave, cook it again, stir it until it's slime, like your lovely slime. So once it's like cool enough for you to touch it, then you just mold it. And then you can make a mochi circle, like a little mochi dumpling, and then you can add like maybe honey to it or some cocoa powder or matcha. Or you could flatten it into a disc and you could put like maybe a banana and some peanut butter, and then you could have a little daifuku. Or you could put a little strawberry and some red bean paste that you buy from the market. Or you could put ice cream, like frozen balls of ice cream, and then you can make your own mochi ice cream at home. It's very, very easy. You can't fudge up this recipe.
Well, I mean, I can't guarantee, but I will try it out, and I'll send you photos or videos, and hopefully I could make you proud, Kat.
I'll send you the recipe. And the other one, if you have a waffle maker, is that you make a waffle batter, but with, again, mochi flour, mochiko, and it's very easy. You just blend everything or mix everything together and you just make your waffle. Super, super easy.
So does that make it a very, like, QQ waffle?
Yes, like a big chewy boba waffle.
Oh,
people
dear.
line up for mochi waffles in America, so you can make it at home now.
That sounds so good. Yes, that's going to be my mini project coming up at home since we're going through this 5th wave of pandemic here in Hong Kong.
I heard about that. Oh my gosh.
Yeah, so I mean, we're not fully locked down, but kind of semi-lockdown. We're not going anywhere, and everyone is pretty much advised to work from home. The weather is cold out there, and there's just a lot of issues where like foreign domestic helpers who tested positive, they would get kicked out by their employers, and then they would have nowhere to go because they don't have a visa to stay here, nor are there any spaces for them in the hospital. So it's been quite tough to watch what's been going on.
I'm sorry to hear that.
I hope we will get through this, or I always joke about it with my boyfriends, like, let's see if we get to travel out of the city before we actually ultimately move out of the city. So I'll keep you guys posted. But next up, I want to talk a little bit more about Asian representation through food, which we mentioned a little bit earlier. When it comes to the topic of Asian representation, we often talk about how Asians are represented in Hollywood movies or in pop culture. But how about Asian representation in food? I know it's yet again another huge topic, but I just want to know, what's your take on this, Kat?
I'm actually very proud of it right now because I know a lot of people in food media who are API part of the AAPI community, and they've been so supportive of everything that Subtle Asian Baking has been doing. So there's definitely more representation now in food media. Like you have a lot of the food journalists who are AAPI members. So I'm actually very proud of that fact. There's a lot of people who are Asian who are very famous cookbook authors. We have, Joanne, who is the Korean vegan. Her book is like a bestseller. Amazing. And we have a lot of great cookbooks coming out who are also by Asian Americans. You have Eric Kim's Korean American that's coming out. You have the book called Crying in H Mart that's like huge mega seller. You have my book that's coming out, Modern Asian Baking at Home. Very, very excited. Of course, it's my book.
Yes.
you have Catherine Zhang, who won Zumble's Just Desserts. She's coming out with a book. I think it's called Mochi Bakes and Cakes. She's coming out with a book at the end of this year. So I think we're getting to a point where we're being more and more represented in food culture and food media. Of course, there's always room for improvement. There's always room for growth. There's always room for more things. Like, are you a fan of the Great British Bake Off?
I do watch that from time to time.
So they had recently the Japan Week, where the contestants pass off, Chinese and Indian food as Japanese food for Japan Week. So there's always ways that we could do things a little bit better, represent the food and the culture better so that people don't mistake, Indian food for Chinese food, because we're not homogenous, we're heterogeneous, right? Is it sorry, what's the word? Heterogeneous.
Heterogeneous. Yes, it's a mouthful.
Sorry, English is my third language, so I'm working on it still in my 30s.
No, I mean, despite I've been speaking English all my life, I'm still not sure most of the time.
I mean, I think in Chinese, I like when I'm mentally in my thoughts, it's Chinese.
Right.
I'm pretty sure of it.
Right.
Yeah, so we can always do better.
Yeah.
We could always do better. I think we're getting to the point where we're getting more representation in the media, in food culture, but there's always room for improvement. Like very recently, there was a restaurant called Lucky Lee's in New York City where a non-Asian woman was selling Chinese food, but she called it healthier and better Chinese food. And that was quite hurtful, because we're always saying people are always saying things like rice is unhealthy, it gives you diabetes, your food is full of grease and MSG. There's always people saying that Asian food is dirty or not as healthy or not fit for, mass consumption and things like that. So we could always do better and have more representation and, have more Asians pushing out Asian cuisine.
Yeah. Despite being Asian or like Asian food, in the past few years, Asian food is a trend. Some people actually see it as a trend that they could capitalize on. But I mean, just when they are trying to push out any Asian food, let's say for non-Asians, I mean, I don't rule out the possibilities of there being non-Asians who just truly appreciate Asian heritage, Asian food. But at the same time, it's important to always remember when you are pushing out some Asian products, it's important to maybe consult some of your Asian friends and see if the products or marketing materials are correct. And it's also important to remember that these Asian foods that you might be capitalizing on could be the kind of food that someone grew up with every day. It's full of stories, heritage, and cultures.
Yes.
I'm really happy to see Asian food scenes in many places, for example, even in the UK, is becoming more developed. But another question about Asian food. This is a completely random question. Since you have Vietnamese, I'm just wondering if you have any recommendations as for where we can find the best Vietnamese food outside Vietnam.
Definitely at your Vietnamese auntie's house because they cook so well and it's always delicious. People say that you have to go to Vietnam for the best Vietnamese food, but outside of Vietnam, I would say maybe my grandma, my Vietnamese grandma. She cooks very well. She taught my mom a few dishes, so I'll have to ask my mom to make them. My mom made bún riêu. Bún, it's a bun rio, R-I-E-O, but they say bun jiu, and then there's bun bo hue, and then pho, of course. So if you want to test a Vietnamese restaurant to see if it's authentic and if it tastes good, just order their pho. If the pho is not good, then just get out of there.
What's your definition of a good pho?
It just has to have, you have to have all the spices in there, you know, it has to have a good, like, fresh, meaty taste. The soup has to just be very flavorful and full of umami. And the noodles can't break, you know, they have to have a little bit of a good toothsome, right? And what else? You know, it just has to be loaded with spices and lots of scallions and lots of herbs and things like that. And then, you know, squirt your lemon juice and then put your side of hoisin sauce and your sriracha and your, you know, chili oil and all of that. Yeah, I mean, you just have to go to a Vietnamese household to have the best pho.
Yeah, I know where I'll be going when I'm in America, Kat. It's like, those are some really good tips for my quest to find the best pho out there. Because for now, one place that's number one on my list is actually this place. It's completely random. It's this place called First Double that's in Riverside in California. I just discovered it by accident when I was in California 2 years ago. Little did I know I would not be able to have their pho for, you know, 2 years and counting. So, I mean, I still hope that they're still operating. And for First Double's owner, if you happen to be listening, I love your pho. Please continue doing whatever you're doing.
Yeah, just go to any place that has pho on it, like for sizzle.
Right, yeah.
For sure. And there was this place that made really good Vietnamese food in Minneapolis. I don't remember the name, but they also made a really good chicken rice that my husband always raves about. And we miss that place so much. And then my two go-to places, they're both in Brooklyn. One's in Bay Parkway and one's in Avenue U. I'm not sure if they're still open because of COVID and all the things like that. And then in the Seattle area, I'm blanking out now, but I'll have to get back to you on that.
Yeah, do send me your list, Kat.
Absolutely.
So now it's time for us to move on to the next segment, which is
Rapid Bias.
In this segment, I'll be asking my guests biased questions they have got asked at some point in life, and also some common biased questions that Asians get asked a lot. So, Kat, are you ready?
Yes.
Great, let's get going. Where are you really from?
Where I'm really from, well, first of all, the void, because everyone comes from the void, and then my mom's uterus. And then she popped me out in Montreal. So I was born in Montreal, and then I came to New York.
Well, at least it's not the trash.
The trash. Yes, the trash.
Exactly. Which is, you know, where many Asians come from, according to our moms. You speak good English for an Asian.
Thank you so much. This is actually a fake voice. It's a TikTok-generated artificial voice, just like the rocket voice.
You're just AI, Kat, aren't you? You are pretty for an Asian.
I didn't even know that it was a microaggression until much later on. Because, like, a friend said this to me, and I was like, oh, thank you. I thought of it as a compliment, right? I was very humbled by it, and then I thought about it again and again. What did that part mean by for an Asian?
Yeah, or just stop at you're pretty, period. That's all. And next up, go back to your country.
To Chinatown? To where? To Chinatown, New York? Like, to Canada? To Montreal? Imagine if Nathan Chan went back to his home country to win the medals. Who would be winning medals for you, America, at the Winter Olympics?
But next question. Your page is too Asian.
Should I change my username? We are subtle Asian baking. Should we change it to not very Asian baking?
And finally, you Asian people should tone it down.
Should we just like put some paint on us, or like hide in a blanket, or tone what down? Tone down our voices? I don't get that.
Yeah.
Stop being so Asian.
Yeah, exactly. That's what we get all the time. It's like, if we stop being Asian, what can we be?
And if you think about it, every American is an immigrant unless you're a Native American.
Yeah.
Right? And we all belong here. It doesn't matter what we celebrate. It doesn't matter what we eat. We are all patriotic.
Yeah.
Don't look at us like we're not part of this country. We are as a part of this country as anyone else who is American.
Yeah, and most importantly, for even Asians outside America, Asians are just people. We're not monsters. We're not aliens. I think sometimes I wish I was.
We are not.
But thank you. That was Rapid Bias. But now, as we wrap up the conversation, Kat, I know you are working on something that's also very exciting, which is a new bake sale. Can you tell us more about it?
Yeah, absolutely. I'm so glad we're going to talk about this because we just launched it. It's called the Very Asian Bake Sale and the Very Asian Fundraiser. We call it Very Asian because half of the funds will go to Michelle Lee's The Very Asian Foundation, and we're hopeful that, these funds will help amplify POC and Asian voices in the community. And half of the funds will also go to Heart of Dinner in New York City, which provides meals for older adults and, your food poor neighbors in Chinatown areas of New York City. And all of this is to, of course, to help stop Asian hate and also to bring together our community of bakers. You do not have to be Asian to be a part of this. You do not have to be Asian to join our fundraiser, to host a bake sale, to donate funds, to spread word, right? You just be an ally. Anyone can do this. And this is so that, we are using our platforms. Whoever has some influence, and I don't think I'm a big influencer. Like, I love that you called me the queen of subtle Asian baking, but in truth, I am still a micro influencer. Right? Because there are people with millions of followers. And sometimes I feel a little sad when I see that they don't capitalize on that. Like, all they have to do is say something like, stop Asian hate, donate to this fundraiser. And all they need is like 5% of their followers to do something. It doesn't have to be all of their millions of followers, right? To activate and to be motivated, to have a purpose. And people just don't do that. Like I see influencers with 3 million followers, 7 million followers on TikTok, and they don't utilize that little area where they could add a fund, like a charity or a fundraiser. TikTok allows anyone to do that, and they don't do that. So it makes me a little bit sad and disheartened that, people are all about clout these days and all about, greed, perhaps. Why not give back? Give more than you take, right?
Yeah. Sometimes it just takes a simple reshare. But I mean, for this bake sale, for this event that's happening, how can our listeners find the details and how can they contribute with some actionable steps?
Yeah, the very easy way is to just find us on GoFundMe. So our hashtag is Very Asian Bake Sale, or you could also find the Very Asian Fundraiser. You can find it on all of my social pages. I list all of it there. You can find it on modernasianbaking.com in our news section. And then I could also, of course, provide you with the GoFundMe link. I think that would be very easy if you want to promote that on any of your pages. Donate if you can. If you can't, spread word. If you can, host a bake sale and sell some goodies to your friends and family and neighbors, right? And then donate portions of your proceeds. That would be all very helpful. We're just taking a stance, right? We're just doing something right now because we still have to do it. There's still violence against Asians. There's still hate against Asians. And then if we're able to do something, why not do something?
Next up, for this season of Proudly Asian, it's going to be launched around International Women's Day. So the theme of International Women's Day this year is actually Break the Bias. So it's only right for me to ask you, are there any biases that you would like to break? And how do you think that they could be broken?
It's going to take some time, Isabel. I think, maybe the whole model minority thing, how Asian women should be quiet, demure, and silent, and, shy, and not so outspoken and loud. Maybe that's one bias that I want to break, because it's been hard for people like me to just be myself, whether it's on the internet or at work. I've seen that the moment that I have an opinion or, I voice something or I have an idea, I'm shot down. I'm called a troublemaker and, I see that men would just steal my ideas at work. They'll get the promotion while I get retaliated on for saying something, or for being different from that model mold that they expect me to be, that quiet, good Asian girl, So maybe that's a bias that should be broken, but that's going to take time.
That's very important. And just remember, we are not cookies. We don't come out of a mold. So we do have our independent thoughts, everyone. But
we're not mooncakes.
Exactly.
Coming out from a mold.
And finally, what does it mean to be proudly Asian American, Kat?
To be proudly Asian American is just not to let anyone erase who you are and not let people tell you otherwise. If they yuck your yum, you show them that it's actually very yummy and you keep eating it, keep enjoying your foods. Don't be ashamed of who you are. I think that's what pride is, right? You should be openly proud of who you are. You should tell the world that you are very proudly Asian, that you're a very Asian person. Again, you should just not let people push you down and just be more vocal about who you are. Maybe that's what is needed, just stand out there and be proud of who you are and not be shy about it. I think that's something that I need to learn too, right? To not be so humble and so scared of self-promotion, because I see everyone else can do it so easily, but it's been so hard for me to do it, right? And when I do it, I get shut down. But I feel that, if you fall off that horse, climb back up on top of it and then shout from the top of the mountains and say that, I'm proud to be who I am. I'm proud to be an Asian American.
Thank you so much for the conversation, Kat. It was a great pleasure to have you.
Oh, Isabel, it was an honor to be here. Thank you so much.
That's it for this episode of Proudly Asian. Don't forget to follow us on Instagram @proudly.asian for more content. We are on Spotify, Apple Podcasts, and YouTube. Thanks for tuning in. Signing off for now, I'm Isabel Wong.